Hi everyone, my name is Peter. Welcome to Our Worship Sound. I'm getting ready to redo some things in the studio, and I thought it'd be a good time to do some videos on how I have my studio set up. I think it might be informative and helpful to you if you're wanting to have your own space in your own home where you create music. So what I'm going to do is 3 videos, one on soundproofing, one on sound treatment, and one on just technically how I have these videos set up and recording different camera angles and lighting and sound and that kind of stuff, because some people have asked about that. So as you look around the studio, you see I have different things on the wall to sort of dampen the vibrations within the room. So the first thing we need to understand is that is not soundproofing, okay? What that does is it helps keep the sound in the room more even, but that's acoustical treatment or sound treatment. So when we talk about soundproofing, we're talking about reducing the amount of sound that goes in and out of a room. And we want to know that it's a relative term. It's tough to get an absolutely soundproof room because as much as you do, there's still going to be some vibrations and some sound traveling in and out of a room. Now, I have this room set up in such a way that basically I can do kind of my own thing in here. My family can do their own thing in other parts of the house, and typically we're not bothering each other. But that said, my wife is currently watching TV in the other room, and we had to come to a compromise on the volume level of the TV so I could do this video. But anyway, soundproofing, there's some general principles that you need to apply, and I'm going to talk about how I applied those principles when putting the studio together. Number 1, you need mass. Number 2, you need dead space or empty space. And number 3, you need isolation. So we'll talk about how those things came into play. So first of all, some of these walls, like this wall, they're both exterior walls. And so they have they're just concrete block. And on the other side of them is earth, because this is a basement area. And so it's just soil on the other side of it. So tons of mass on the other side, unlimited mass. And so the sound's not going anywhere once we get through there. And then on this wall, behind this wall is a fireplace, and so it's got concrete block that surrounds that as well. So on all 3 of these walls, basically all we had to do was just put up basic 2x4 framing and put insulation inside of the walls and then put sheetrock over that. So we had the mass of the sheetrock, but we also had the mass on the other side of the wall. And also with the concrete block, there's space within the concrete block, so that empty space within the block prevents the conduction of sound as well. Now, one more thing with these walls, what we tried to do was limit the amount of connections we had between the wood framing and the ceiling joists above, because that would conduct sound that way. So we tried to limit that, and so that's a way that we used isolation in that. So we had the mass, we had the empty space, and we had the isolation that way. This wall was different. Because on the other side of this wall is our utility room where we have our washer and our dryer, and so a lot of sound can come in and out of that room. So what we did was actually build a double framed wall. So there were 2 completely separate 2x4 frames, and in between there was about maybe 3 or 4 inches of dead space or empty space, and then there was insulation on both frames, and then there's drywall or sheetrock on the outside of that. So we had kind of, we had the dead space, which was definitely helpful there. The sound doesn't travel as well through there. And then we had the 2 separate walls, so they were isolated. And there's also extra mass because there's the drywall on the other side, but also the drywall on this side actually did a double layer of drywall that way. And so there's a lot of mass there for the sound to try to go through, and I don't hear the laundry machines, and they don't hear me, so I don't bother them, which is a great thing. And then the other thing I did with this wall is I used just a sealant or a caulk around the edges, and so there weren't any gaps between the sheetrock and the floor, and just kind of sealed those off a little bit. The floor, since this is a basement, is just concrete and then earth below that, and so there's no concern there. Now, if I were on a different level of the house, I would try to do some things with the floor to try to minimize the sound travel between that. The ceiling, a couple things to talk about with the ceiling that are different. So the ceiling joists run this way in this room, and one of the things that I did to kind of isolate the drywall from the ceiling is instead of screwing the drywall right into the ceiling joist, I use something called resilient channel, because if you screw the sheetrock right into the ceiling joist, every time you screw it, that'll be a conductor for the sound between this room and the room above it. And so to isolate that sheetrock, what I did was put in this resilient channel, and I ran it perpendicular to the ceiling joist so that it goes right into the ceiling joist, but then the sheetrock goes into the resilient channel instead of the floor joist. So if you have the floor joist here, the resilient channel kind of bends down about maybe 3/8 of an inch or so, and then there's a level part that comes across, and that's the part, it's a metal strip, and that's what you screw the drywall into. And so in that way, the drywall is more isolated from the floor joist above. So I had insulation up there, which provided some good dead space, empty space, and then isolation in terms of the resilient channel, and also extra mass through using a slightly thicker board of sheetrock. So I think I used 5/8 instead of 1/2 inch. So a little extra mass there. So we've talked about the walls, we've talked about the floor and the ceiling. Now some of the biggest ways for sound to get in and out of a room are actually through windows, doors, and air handlers. And so what I did in those three areas was, for the door, I installed an exterior door. The exterior door is meant to be a little bit heavier, and it's made to be more sealed around the edges, and so that helps a lot. The other nice thing about this particular exterior door is it has a big window, which helps if I'm doing a recording session with somebody in the room, and I can be on the other side of the door, and we can visually communicate. It's also really nice when I'm teaching one-on-one lessons here. I do that some during the summer, and so it helps the students not feel so quite so isolated in the room with me. So if you're looking at teaching lessons in your room, that might be something you want to look at as well. So that's the door, and then the window is just kind of a basic, ugly basement window. It's not a concern from a soundproofing standpoint, so we just left that in place. I do have this big air handler that runs through the room up here. So one simple thing that I did to kind of help soundproofing in that way was I took some sort of semi-rigid insulation that I used in the acoustical treatments. I'll talk about that in the next video, but I took that kind of insulation and I wrapped some fabric around it and put it inside the air handler. Now wrapping in a fabric helps to keep the fibers from blowing into the rest of our home, which is a good healthy thing to do to try to prevent that. But just a little bit of amount of insulation in there helps to keep sound from rattling around too much in the air handler and coming in and out of the room that way. Now, if I'm doing a really kind of sensitive recording session with a microphone, I will go ahead and turn the heating and cooling off, and so that isn't blowing into the room and creating extra noise that way. So those are some basic things with soundproofing. I'm no expert at it, and there's certainly a lot of things we can get into with that, but there are some great resources online for you to check out as well. So the next video will be about sound treatment, and then we'll go from there. So I hope that was helpful. Be sure to check out ourworshipsound.com for more information, and we'll see you soon.